Hello, son. You came to tell me what a good dad you are? What do you want? Applause? It's my little boy. I can't give up on him.
Zen, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with Popcorn Podcast today about a film that is really important for people to see this year in the sun. Congratulations. So tell us a little bit about your character, Nicholas, in your words. What is he struggling with in the sun?
It's not important for the audience to know, but it's something that the audience should know, that it's never quite clear what he's struggling with. It seems to be just endogenous depression, and he seems to blame it on his parents' divorce. And he thinks, like you see in the film, he thinks that maybe going to his father's place, having a shake-up of the environment will maybe fix the problem. It doesn't end up doing that. And so it's sort of like this cloud hanging over him that he doesn't know why or what's happening to him, which just adds to the sort of distress that he's feeling. It's not quite as simple as what happened to him. It's just more about what he's going through at the time.
The Sun is quite a complex movie as a result of that sort of grey area. What was it about Florian Zeller's story that made you want to play Nicholas, that drew you into the role?
When I initially read the sides, I instantly felt this sort of spark or like resonance in my heart when I was reading his lines. I felt like it didn't take much to get me into the emotional state I needed to be in just from reading the writing, which is credit to Florian. It seemed like a very important story to Florian. He says that it's not his story, but it's his truth, and he doesn't want to make it about him. I also felt like everyone involved in this project were involved in it because of a personal reason, and they felt that this story was something that needed to be told. And I feel like everyone either has gone through something really hard in their life, existential, or knows someone close to them that has. And everyone involved in this project, cast and crew, all sort of had that sense that this was something that needed to be told and something that would help get the conversation going, especially like post-COVID. And I know that I was sort of separated from all my friends in Melbourne. We had probably the harshest lockdown in the world.
Yeah.
And so I definitely drew on that as well.
There's a lot of emotion at the forefront for Nicholas all the way through the film, things that, like you said, people will be able to relate to or see themselves in or have some sort of resonance with. But for you, taking on this role, it must have been quite exhausting at times to get into that emotional headspace.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm not a method actor. I like to sort of break it up in between takes, and especially with roles as heavy as this, there are very few actors would be willing to sort of expose themselves to something like this for months on end. They are some of the best artists out there. It was such a heavy role that I felt I needed to break it up a bit and have a bit of lightness, especially since I was away from home. I hadn't seen my mother and my brothers in a long time because they were off filming something else. That being said, there was one scene, the hospital scene. We filmed that over 2 days. The first day I sort of tried to lighten the mood a bit in between takes by coming out of character. The second day I decided it'd actually be easier in between takes to sort of just blankly stare at the ground and stay in that headspace or just listen to Florian, and that's sort of all I would do because it was too much to go in and out of that all the time. And the strategies I would use to sort of shake it off a bit when I got home was I would like to watch The Office, the American Office. Don't worry, I've also watched the British one.
I was going to pull you up on that, Zen, because I'm glad you said that. I don't need to score you.
Yeah.
Good.
I watched the American one because it's just lighthearted and it's not too difficult to think about when you're watching. I made a thing of it. I had to get through all 9 seasons throughout the shoot. So I would go home and do that. I'd also play video games with my friends online, which was basically how I was hanging out with them during the pandemic anyway.
I can only imagine how important it would be to find the balance of finding the right moments to decompress, but then, like you said, to stay in that headspace, which I can only imagine would be so difficult. Mental illness, while we're talking about this, of any kind is really hard to convey for anyone who has experienced it. And you run the risk of it coming across as like cliched or stereotypical on screen in film. How did you prepare for the role in finding the right level of authenticity for Nicholas?
Yeah, well, I think I had about 3 months to prepare between being cast and flying over. I had sort of weekly Zooms or more than weekly with Florian talking about his experiences and talking about Nicholas himself and really highlighting that he's unable to connect with his parents. That was the center of gravity for the film, was that father and son just couldn't connect or relate or talk to each other without there being some sort of thing in the way. And talking, like I said before, everyone's got people around them who maybe have struggled with something or themselves have struggled, having in-depth conversations with everyone around you. And my family, we all read each other's scripts that we're going for, and we have a lot of conversations with each other about that. And even going for walks and talking with Hugh or Laura about Nicholas and about what's happening in the world right now. I think trying to absorb as much of that as possible really helps. And I remember Florian also got me to research a poet called Arthur Rimbaud. I always butcher his pronunciation, but he was a French poet in south of France, I believe, who wrote all his poetry before the age of 14.
Wow.
And he wrote about really dark existential stuff before becoming a weapons seller, I think in like North Africa for the rest of his life. And he didn't write anything else after 14. And he's quite, I think, famous in France. But he wrote a lot of quite dark stuff. And that sort of also helped me get in the headspace. And yeah, about trying not to get it like sort of cliche, I really just tried to focus in on like the relationships between each character. I hadn't seen my dad, which is Peter, in probably months. And I've been getting frustrated with my mum, Laura. Like, you know, how she's at the start of the film, like he's not even, he looked at me so mad with such hatred. I can't remember the exact line. And focusing on those and talking to each of the cast members about like what they think's going on. And we sort of had our own theories. And I think, yeah, just conversation is the way to do it.
Yeah, I agree. Now, speaking of conversation, obviously you worked very closely with the writer-director Florian Zeller. What was he like to collaborate with on set?
Florian is one of the nicest people I've ever met. He knew what he wanted, but at the same time, he was very open-minded. He would take advice from anyone, crew, cast, doesn't matter. If someone thinks something doesn't quite work or something would be really cool or work really well, he'll listen. And he's very adaptive. He's able to change on the day. And I know that like sets can be quite high stress environments, especially if the scene is high stress, but he was always present there and able to adapt. And that's something I really admire. That's something I wish a skill I had, is he's able to see the whole picture really clearly. And every time we'd be doing a scene, if I'd be standing somewhere else, be like, wait, no, this doesn't work because of what's happening in scene 67, because he's, you know, obviously written it, he knows everything about it, but he has such a clear image of what he wants. And it's something I would one day love to be able to do.
It sounds like you learned a lot from him and his process, which you'll take through your career. Now, one thing I have read about Florian is that he doesn't like to do rehearsal that much. Is that right? So he wants the actors, you know, to find a lot of themselves in their performances and in the moment. How did that feel and change your performance with that method?
I feel like at first it was daunting, of course, because you want to have like a safety net of some kind. What it ended up doing was creating scenes where the reactions were very raw. Basically, he wouldn't tell some of the actors that he was going to do something. Or in a scene in the hospital, when we were supposed to be sort of filming the first take, that was only supposed to be the first few lines, he decided to keep it rolling and to see where we as actors would take it, kind of like an improv class. A lot of takes were like that, where we just sort of kept going with the scene, and it would be like, you know, most of the time it wouldn't work because we'd be a bit confused by why haven't they said cut. But sometimes we capture something really raw and something that like you couldn't quite capture if you thought about it too much, because you're having just a raw emotional reaction or raw response, like whether that's like an eye twitch or like a little look you give. But it was really interesting, and I think it worked quite well.
Yeah, I mean, just to build on, I guess, how the film comes to a head, knowing that you as performers and actors weren't given too much sort of insight or direction, you had to feel that moment, you know, that just gives me a very different take on what played out at the end of the film, because I'm still, you know, spinning from it, really. Like, it was a huge impact for me watching the film, really, really powerful. You've been working with Florian, and of course it would be remiss of me not to bring up Laura Dern or Hugh Jackman. What did you learn from such great veteran actors so early in your career that you're definitely going to latch onto and take with you?
I would say that from like Hugh and Laura, who are obviously veterans, I learned that it's okay to be nervous. Even the best, and this is something Florian said as well, even the people at the top of their game, the ones that everyone loves, sometimes they don't know what to do, and sometimes they can be unsure about their capabilities. And it was really sort of reassuring to know that even the best, people I hope to be half as good as one day, sometimes second guess themselves and aren't fully sure. But I learned a lot of stuff. This being my first sort of acting as an adult, I would say, because it's very different from being a child actor where you can sort of be a kid, play pretend, you don't have to think about it too much, and you get away with it pretty easily. Whereas with this now, I have to start making a lot of active choices. There's so much more to it than I initially thought. I was 18 when I was cast, and I'm 20 now, so I'm still quite young, and I've still got a lot to learn. But even in the time between then and now, like a lot's changed, and I carry all these experiences with me, and I see it as like a great basket of knowledge I can use for my next project as well. And that's all
Amazing.
thanks to Florian and Laura and Hugh.
Now, speaking of a treasure trove of knowledge, you weren't in the scene with Hugh and Sir Anthony Hopkins. Did you get the opportunity to be on set for that short but powerful scene that Hugh and Anthony had together?
Yeah, and that was an absolute masterclass. That scene is probably my favorite scene in the film between those two because it suddenly clicks what's wrong with the family, and it's sort of a generational thing.
Yeah.
And especially with male mental health and like how there's just no communication there, and you can see the parallels. And one thing I learned as well from filmmaking is the way they sort of set up the shots where Anthony's kind of looking down at Hugh, and then Hugh's kind of looking down at me in the other scenes. And watching Anthony act as well, I wasn't too starstruck by most people, but meeting Anthony was a bit scary. Making eye contact, it's like I'm about to be killed by a predator. But it's like a lion or something.
Hannibal Lecter.
Exactly, it's terrifying. But yeah, no, it was really cool to see that, and there are some real subtle details in that scene that I can't believe a performer is capable of, and I just hope that someday I can be as good as that or half as good. I'll be happy with a 10th.
Well, I can't wait to see where you end up in that world, mate. I think it's so encouraging to see how conversations around mental health continue to be represented in art more and more these days. How do you hope The Sun will help the conversation surrounding mental health?
Well, I just think it would be a success if people were talking about mental health more. I think, of course, the film leaves you with a lot of thoughts, and some might find it uncomfortable to watch or uncomfortable to experience. It's an uncomfortable subject matter, but as long as people are talking, that's progress. That's one thing I'm proud of my generation and people these days is we're a lot more open with mental health stuff than we used to be. So I think it's just following along those lines of being part of the conversation and making it known that it's okay to struggle and it's okay not to know what to do. And you just have to know that there are people out there who can help you and there are people that do care for you.
I could not agree more, Zen. In wrapping up, mate, I've really loved talking to you. I just want to know what's next for you. Can you share what we might be able to look forward to see you in?
Nothing confirmed as of the moment. I'm doing my own writing and my own animation stuff, which I just love to do in my spare time in between projects. There's a couple of things that are maybes, but I'm not confirmed for anything at the moment, so I can't say, I'm afraid.
You've practiced that. You rehearse. You know you can't say too much because it's not confirmed yet.
Avatar 4, but you know how it is. I can't say that.
Of course. I think the way Jim Cameron's going, he'll blurt it out himself freely anyway. He's quite open, isn't he, on the trail?
Yeah. No, I wish. We'll see.
I'll manifest that for you, Zen.
Thank you, Tim. I appreciate it.
Hey, mate, thanks again, and all the best for the release of The Sun in Australia, and congratulations.
Thank you so much. I'll catch you next time.